What do you get when you take a former manager plus report combo, who are now real life friends, one a management coach and sudden viral internet star who shoots from the hip, and the other a CX exec turned advisor who overthinks everything? This podcast. Welcome to the business of humans. I'm Joe, founder of CX Joe Advisory and the Overthinker. My partner in crime is Lynda. She's the founder of Leveled Up Leadership and the Internet Star. Join us as we talk about business, relationships, humanity, success, and also failure through the lens of friendship, heaps of radical transparency and honesty, and zero BS. Let's get started with today's episode.
Hey Joe, how are you?
I'm doing great, Lynda. How about you?
It's been a good week. It's been an interesting week. Also I'm cold. I'm so over being cold. I don't want to be hot, but I'm sick of being cold. And it's not even that bad. Like I can't even really complain that much about this winter, but ugh.
I hear that. I hear that. Lynda, today, I think one of the reasons I'm a mix today between being absolutely ecstatic and also maybe having a little bit of grievances to air is because I think I have my whole tech set up in order now for the podcast. But I want all of our listeners to know, when you first floated the idea to me, I didn't know there were going to be any requirements or investments needed. We recorded the first couple episodes. I thought they looked fine. Lynda then informed me that I needed better lighting. And so I had to hop on Amazon. I ordered one. I thought that these lights were only for like Instagram influencers or TikTok, and I am not one. You are, but I'm not. And you had to coach me into getting one of these. I unpacked it. It was very intimidating. There were wires everywhere, so I left it on my desk for a week or two. I think the last time we recorded, I had been optimistic I could hook that up. Then I ordered a microphone for extra credit, so you'd be extra happy with me. And they were both scary to set up. I got my wife's help. I called a friend. She had me order a docking station from Amazon. That was confusing also. And then I got everything all set up, and I thought that I was going to get extra credit from you, like all 10 scores. And then suddenly you informed me that I needed a better webcam. And that's
Yeah.
basically where like things crossed the line. I think the
Yeah.
podcast almost ended when you sent me that text. That was offensive.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I
So
offended you.
what's next? With
I
that, I
think we're
mean,
good. I mean, I think at some point in time we're probably going to upgrade all of the things, right? And we'll get like a whole professional podcast
hmm
situation.
hmm
I will tell you though, this is what brought it to a head for me. I'm sorry, I need something over here. So I I was on another podcast, so I kind of have a recurring spot on another podcast, and
Fancy.
something. They're lovely though. They're lovely individuals. They've got a great vibe, totally different than our vibe. We talk about different things, sort of. I mean, I always talk about work. But anyway, I was on their podcast, and when they produced it, I saw the video clip and I was just like, why do I look so grainy? Like when I film this, when we sit here and we film, it doesn't look grainy. It looks fine.
hmm
Like I feel like the video quality is great. But then I was watching theirs and I was like, ugh, I look so grainy. And their cameras were crisp and
hmm
clean.
hmm
So I ended up picking one up, and I actually wasn't going to float this to you as soon as I did, right? I was going to like let it ride for a little longer because Joe, I have worked with you extensively and I
Yes.
kind of understand like the level of change. And, I always talk about spoon feeding change to people. When I'm coaching managers, I'm like, people hate change. I mean, look, we've gotten rid of the penny. We hate change. And so I was really
No, I
not,
was being handled. I know that. You
yeah,
were
I was
definitely
sitting on
waiting
it.
until I figured
Yeah.
out the light and the microphone before you dropped the
Yes.
camera on me. I know
Yes.
that.
And then because today we have a special guest, which
Yes,
I
we
can't
do.
wait for us to introduce. She's also got a webcam. And I was like, well, we can't have our guest like we all have to look the same, right? Like we have to have like it's the similitude. And so when I sent you that text, I was like, dude, do you want me to just order it for you? I'll just do
I
it.
know.
I
I
will
know.
just order it for you. It's plug and play.
I
I
know.
knew like the anxiety that I was introducing into your
I know.
existence. And I did it anyway, which
I
is,
know.
I think like so classic. Like, isn't that like the most classic management problem? we could talk about of like, oh, I've got to tell you something I know you don't want to hear, and you're probably not going to want to do, but I have to tell you anyway.
Absolutely.
That was so classic.
Yeah, and I always feel like the guinea pig or the subject for all of your management tactics, and it's amazing. And you also knew that once you threatened to order it for me, like I was a child, that I would I would belligerently order it myself. Which again, and I feel like if people could see our text, it'd be very on brand for the podcast. Like we're at once besties and the warmest texts, and also just kind of bickering and opposite humans at all times. But I also want to take your lead. I mean, all joking aside, the reason when I woke up today I was the most ecstatic was not just to record this pod, which is always a source of great inspiration and joy, but even more so because it's our first ever episode with a guest on today. And
Yes.
I'm genuinely just really, really pumped and excited about it. And it was a fun process leading up to this where both of us kind of were equal excitement and had the same idea for the megastar human and professional leader we'd bring on. So let me pass it over to you, Lynda, and maybe help to explain to the listeners about today's theme and kind of set up our incredible guest for today.
Yeah, yes. They say that you should never Google yourself, right?
I've heard that.
It, and I've been on this very interesting journey over the last 9 months, one that I has been incredible, but also one I would never have ever pegged for myself. Well, I might have had some wine. There was probably wine involved, but
Hmm.
anyway,
Hmm. For the first time in
I
your life. That's really interesting.
yeah, ever weird.
Did you like
Uh,
it?
it was delicious. So I ended up on one of the AIs, right? And I don't know why I got this kind of like hair, but I was like, define, Linda Leeds, right? Because I think so many people also know that that's not my actual last name. And I was just like, define Linda Leeds. And it came back with the most hilarious take on me. And I'm going to share that here in a minute. But the interesting thing on this was a moment of reflection. So the biggest moment for me was like this moment of reflection of like, is that how I'm seen? Is that really what it is? And and I think that this leads so well into our guest today because we've talked about bringing your whole self to work. We've talked about like how you show up at work and who you are and how to manage people and manage your leaders and navigating kind of toxic work situations. But we need to take a minute and talk about personal branding. And you know that I don't love the corporate buzzwords. I don't feed into that. But I do think it's really important for us to speak about personal branding at work because it is important to understand how you're presenting at work. Because if you know how you're presenting and if that feeds into your overall narrative, then you can get shit done, right? Because you can leverage that take on you or that narrative and really utilize it to your advantage. So we are going to talk to our good friend Alexa, and I'll kick it over to you to do an intro, and then we'll bring her on, who is like head of brand. And we thought like, what a great way to talk about branding from somebody who understands these things. So I want you to kick it over to you, and then once we bring Alexa on, I will share what the AI had to say about me.
Okay, okay, cool. That's a good teaser. Um, so it's genuinely my privilege to introduce today's guest. I was very pleased when Lynda said I'd have the honors. I'm going to do a little bit more formal of an intro in a moment, but I do want to mention again, when Lynda and I were brainstorming before we even recorded the first episode of our podcast, we had like a tab on the sheet and a discussion around potential guests who made us really excited, and we both listed today's guest, Alexa. And I know for me, like again, before I get into the more formal intro on this powerhouse career, what I would say is, so today's pod is fun too, because it's kind of like three old friends from Daily Harvest back together having a chat. And I remember when Alexa and I first started to work together, we had our first one-on-one, and it not only made my day, but I was genuinely just so impressed. I mean, again, I think the word powerhouse like came to mind for me right away. Um, but not in an intimidating way, in a way where I felt just energized and kind of seen and empowered. But yet here was this powerhouse of a leader and professional and communicator. And I remember how excited I was to have Alexa come chat with our care team at Daily Harvest. And I just remember every single time today's guest would chat with our team, everyone felt the way that I did, like impressed, bowled over, and also empowered. That's my little casual intro. I do want to try to give Alexa some of her career due here. So I'm going to go over, again, a little bit more of a background here and do my best. But Alexa brings sharp cultural instincts and a bias for action as the head of strategy at CBX, which she'll tell us all about. A true thinker and doer, she translates human insight into brand momentum, pushing ideas that connect, captivate, and drive results. Her experience spans high growth D2C brands, as we know, venture capital firms, and creative agencies, giving her a 360-degree view into how brands are built and scaled. She shaped strategy for names like Anheuser-Busch, Walmart, JP Morgan. I haven't heard of any of these companies, by the way.
No, not a
We'll
single
find out
one.
why she wanted us to
No
mention them.
names.
Simply Good Foods, TaylorMade, Human Co., GlaxoSmithKline, Nestle, Unilever, and more. That's, I think, that accounts for like a lot of the products and revenue moving about the planet, and helped to launch brands and innovation that like we experience at Daily Harvest, including, and this brings back very warm memories, but their first plant-based ice cream scoops, I think, as it were, cue the Boys to Men song, and milk lines alongside 30 other SKUs across the portfolio, just in peak Daily Harvest innovation and brand strength days. Alexa was a huge part of that. Also mentors early stage founders, rising strategic talent and creatives, consistently looking for fresh talent and new ways of showing up in culture. And again, just a quick pause there of over the last couple of years, I think I've reached out to Alexa several times for the favor of connecting with people in my network and just knowing that they'd walk away better for it. Outside the office, lastly, she's a lifelong athlete, devoted meal prepper, and serial grocery aisle explorer. So without further ado, and how's that for a build-up? Welcome to the podcast, Alexa.
Welcome, Alexa.
Hi, both. It's so nice to see you guys again.
So
Alexa,
lovely to
maybe
see you.
first off, can you provide the listeners with your full name and make sure that we get your last name just right?
Of course. My name is Alexa DePascuale. I currently serve as the head of strategy at CBX, as you mentioned, Joe, but we go way back now from our time at Daily Harvest. So it's just such a pleasure to get to hang out with you guys for the day.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I have
great. Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
go
go
for
ahead.
it, Lynda.
No, go for it. You had a thought.
I had a thought. I had one important question, and then I'll kick it over to you for maybe the next topic and question. But my first question, Alexa, was with all the brands and all the accolades I just mentioned. So you must have made just a tremendous amount of different like high scale, high impact presentations and meetings, and so forth across your career. So today, though, you're the first guest on the Lynda and Joe in the Business of Humans podcast. So I just, I wanted to ask you, after everything you've been through your whole career, like how nervous are you to be here today and be our first guest, and how are you dealing with those nerves?
I mean, right when you said it, I was like, "Oh my goodness, the first." You know what I'd like to say though is I'm honored because I feel like that then means my brand that I've been building for a long time now has stuck with both of you to
Sure
be,
has.
in the mind, right? So I'm just thankful for that, and it's just another kind of feather of, hey, something's working, something's landing. Let's figure out what those things are. So nerves around Lynda and Joe, absolutely not, never.
Amazing, amazing. Of course, there's a little tongue in cheek for anyone not watching. It was fun to watch both of you just like look at me with horror as I went through that question. Like, what the hell is this guy doing? Anyway, so that was my
I
little
was
joke.
hoping
I
you were
had
going to ask
fun.
about cereal, honestly. That's where I like when I heard cereal and I was like, okay, are we saying cereal with an S or cereal with a C? Because if we're
Okay,
talking about cereal with a C, this is a very serious discussion.
right, right.
And I need to understand what is the cereal of choice.
Right. And I was going to say no matter how that wound up, I was just going to say the word cinnamon toast crunch, but anyways, we have a lot to talk about. So back to you, Lynda.
Yeah, but what is the cereal, Alexa? Like we're
So,
not moving on
yeah.
from.
No, of course not. So right now the obsession is Catalina Crunch. First off,
Mm.
it
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
available in bulk at Costco. I'm a huge cereal eater. Like that is just my guilty pleasure. Probably also while watching serial killer like documentaries and listening to
Wow, look at
because
that.
that just absolutely tracks. It's also just really high protein, great macros, and again, as you know, Joe mentioned, as a health, fitness, and sort of wellness individual, I'm always looking at that. So yes, I go into the aisles to look at packaging and just understand how positioning is coming to life visually through design. But then also, I just really want great products that I love and that I know my family would love. So yeah, Catalina Crunch, and I think we've got right now either the cinnamon or the honey version. And they're like honey grams, if you remember honey grams.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And yeah, of course. But just the better for you option.
Hmm.
So I'm all about that.
So on
Amazing.
brand.
I was watching TV last night, eating Lucky Charms, but I like it dry. I don't like it with milk, and I just that's like a preferred movie snack for me is just like a
Hmm.
toddler eating cereal.
You know,
Sorry.
Linda, you and my husband would really get along. He eats everything dry. Bagels, no cream cheese, no butter, like just toasted
Oh,
dry.
cool.
Cereal, dry, no milk. Love him to death. But it's just very interesting to me. Also, I'm a huge Lucky Charms fan. Like, definitely as a kid, the marshmallow picker, though. And like, when they finally launched just the marshmallow bag,
Right?
absolutely. I mean, yeah,
Right?
there's nothing better.
Full
There's nothing
support.
better.
Amazing. So I'm going to share with the two of you. So first of all, so early in my career, and I think that most people who know me know that I'm sarcastic, I'm dry, but I'm also kind of no bullshit, right? I'm pretty
That's
no
true.
bullshit. I'm just
Yeah,
like
we could attest to
100%.
that. Hmm.
let's get to the point, let's do the thing, and let's move on. And so for me, this idea of personal branding always sent my bullshit like meter into the red. I was like, no, it felt so contrived to me.
Hmm.
And when I say this is up until probably the last maybe 10 years, like I was really hesitant to it. And because I felt like brand was such a buzzword, it was so like, oh, is it on brand? Are we on brand? What's your brand? Right. And it felt so contrived and it felt so icky to me. And so I really, for the people who were watching, listening, consuming, I really want to talk about like kind of my journey a little bit with that and saying like, yeah, it feels corporate buzzwordy. It feels this thing. But at the heart of the matter, it still is, how are you presenting to people? And is that what you want, right? And putting thought into it. And when I kind of launched my management training program where we talk about being intentional and being an intentional leader, this really kind of feeds into it of saying like, okay, if you don't want to call it your brand, fine, don't do it. If that feels too buzzwordy for you, don't call it your brand. But let's understand things at the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is you need to know how people are perceiving you at work. And if that aligns with who you want to be, right? Like, and I always tell people like other people's opinions of you don't matter, but at work it does, because you need to understand like, do people see me as someone who's reliable, or does somebody see me as strategic, or do they see me as nice, right? Like, and is that how you want to be thought of, especially as you grow in your career? And so personal branding, I think, is crucial for us to understand and really talk about. And I think talking about it from how would we brand a product, because it can feel very daunting, right, Alexa? It can feel really daunting to say like, well, what does that look and feel like, or how do I even present that? And so I'm
Yeah.
so excited to have you here to talk about how we can kind of back into it or reverse engineer, if you will, and talking about personal branding.
Yeah. I think it's also important to remember too that, you know, when you look at it like it's a task that you're going to wake up on a Monday morning and I am going to launch my personal brand, that's the wrong mindset because a brand is built over time. Brian Collins, one of the founders of Collins, the design agency, he says that a brand is a promise performed consistently over time. And I had worked in Collins for a couple of months, and really just like that definition of a brand stuck with me because I also saw the legs of how it worked with people, right? So a brand is a promise performed consistently over time. It's a really important statement because there's multiple factors inside of that talking about a promise, right? A promise is something that you don't just say, you do, right? If we all say that we promise to be on time or we promise to show up, but we don't, we've broken that promise, right? So a brand as a promise performed consistently over time has been something that I remind myself every day, because I think it is a really important part of how the best brands out in the world, like corporation based brands, are being built, but also the best people as brands are being built. But it's not a one day thing. This requires consistency, it requires repetition, and it's over time, which I think sometimes when people approach it as just sort of this finite, like turn it on thing, it's not necessarily the same. We can get into that in more detail, but I hear, Lynda, why that would feel daunting, but you don't have it's a game of inches, right? You don't have to bite off everything at the same time to get to a place where a brand is being built.
I love that. I wrote it down.
I wish I could say I coined it, but just very succinct way that is something that infiltrates the brain of just reminders.
Yes, I love that. Okay, so how would we let's dive in a little bit. How would one person, as they're thinking about, because it's a daunting task, right? And now we're thinking, okay, it's a game of like inches, right? We're just going little bits at it. I use the old saying of like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So let's kind of unpack that a little bit and let's talk about like, how do we even start thinking personal brand strategy?
Yeah. Well, I'll harken back to the corporate way of developing brand strategy, right? So everything always starts with research. And the thing is, as a person, it's different in some cases because we are who we are, right? We are, especially as you start to get sort of wired. And as my dad always says to me, you can't change the spots on a leopard. Once you are your leopard, at a certain point in time, your spots are there and you can become malleable and you can adapt and you can understand how to operate differently. But overall, through and through, look, I'm an Aries for anybody who follows the zodiac sign. It fucking tracks. You know what I mean?
I'm not surprised by this.
Right, exactly. So as much as I may try to tone down fire signs and Aries, it's when I was born. It's how the moon and the world was aligned when I came. So there is an element of research that needs to be done, but there is a recognition that also needs to be acknowledged around just your inherent self, right? So when I say research, it's uncomfortable sometimes, right? Sometimes you have to sit down and talk to other people. And I've done this because I'm comfortable enough now to put myself out there. But you have to ask the hard questions. How do I show up? Where is a place that you saw me at my best? Where is a place that you saw me at my worst? Trying to understand and unpack who you are, and how you are perceived and the experiences that other people have with you. It's a difficult exercise, but it becomes very illuminating and it helps to also create direction. So the three things that I always talk about is that what you want to start to understand when you're building your own personal brand is what is true about you, what is absolutely true that you understand, that everybody else understands. What is also different? How is your pathway different? How is your upbringing different? What are the differences that allow you to potentially stand out or shift the conversation and narrative inside of a crowded marketplace? And then also, what can you do or deliver consistently, right? So, those three aspects are like baselines. Those are the 101s that foundationally people need to understand about themselves, and it needs to be created from a place of who they are, but also all of the experiences that they've gathered over time. And then I like to always talk about this sort of fourth layer is something that is a little bit of X factor, just something that tips the scale in an advantageous way where you're just a little different than everyone else, right? So I can explain a little bit more, but hopefully that those core pillars to start there and really have a refinement and understanding of what you're trying to do is important. The last thing I'll say is all of this at the end of the day should feel obvious and inevitable. It shouldn't feel like someone is trying to force themselves into building their brand. It comes from who they are, where, why they exist in the world, what purpose they feel they have, what they're compelled to. I always talk about, like, people, what do you spend your time doing for fun? That's what you want to focus on for how you build brand around it. So for me, I spend time talking to people for fun. I love it. I'll talk to the grocery store rep. I'll talk to you. Like, I just love it. So it's not off brand for me to be a really heavy qualitative researcher who sits with consumers and runs interviews and talks to stakeholders all day long and is constantly unpacking what people think, feel, and do in certain scenarios. All of that aligns, So I think really just sometimes at the start, taking a beat and having a self-reflection time on your own, and then going out to your trusted, individuals who will tell you the truth and will give you, illuminating insights. Those are the types of people that you want to sit down and do a little research with.
Yeah. I love listening to this. For me, it's like one of those moments where it gives me further affirmation of just, like, I think sitting here with you two today having this conversation is like the exact right place to be, on the planet for me, kind of thing, which is a good feeling. And Alexa, I mean, Lynda and I, as we've, recorded the first couple episodes of the pod, we've been really open with each other and whoever's out there listening, just around, I think we both started the podcast at an interesting time in our career and life journeys. But I think there's something very profound about a lot of what you're saying, and also this, sentiment or joy that I have of, like, hey, I'm spending my time doing something that feels fulfilling, something that I was looking forward to when I got out of bed today, and which maybe does draw on passions and also possibly strengths of mine, right, around connecting people and just having these conversations. And I think one thing about this career chapter for me is, like, trying to optimize against spending most of my time doing things that I hate and find terrifying. And that's always going to be a little part of careers. Like, some discomfort is good for growth, and also it's just like reality. But trying to optimize our time. And I want to kind of spin this into a question. And here, I was really intrigued to hear what was going to come next in your thoughts, because I think something that I found really interesting, at times confusing in my career, and I would imagine maybe some folks listening, or Lynda's, many kind of followers, like, finding their way in their career, might find interesting, is to what extent do you, lean into the natural strengths that you have. From what you've shared already, it sounds like that's a big part of the philosophy. Now, as people go on in their career, and especially their leadership career, they're going to encounter areas where maybe it feels like part of the job, or is going to help them to hang better in the room. And these need to be areas that they learn about and lean into. So I'll say, like, when I was a younger leader in my career, that's kind of like all I would focus on. I'd be like, oh no, I'm not the most technical person in the room. Like, I remember ordering a book that I thought was going to teach me to code. It didn't work. Like, I don't have a good brain for it. But that was literally me as, like, a 20-something-year-old leader. I'm like, look, boss, I bought this book on coding, and then, that person over there, like, speaks really fast. I'm going to speak as fast as they do, and I'm going to do this. And that was, like, a part of my leadership journey. And then later, I became more familiar with the philosophy of, like, okay, learn, stretch yourself, be a little uncomfortable, but also lean into your superpowers and your strengths. That's probably more the tip that I'm on now. But I still say with sincerity, I mean, as people go through their career, it kind of has to be some of both, right? Or how would you advise people to think about that in navigating career and also continuing to build their own brands?
Yeah, 100. It's a great question. So, firstly, I have a personal value system, which every brand typically has, like, a mission, vision, values, all of that. And I have a personal value system, one of which includes stay insatiably curious. So that is something that no matter what, no matter in a work context, no matter in a personal context, staying insatiably curious is really important to me. It's not only important to me, it's also important to how I hire, because I have seen over the course of time of building teams, the importance of people being willing to try and to learn outside of the comfort zone. No one is saying that, of course, it's more comfortable, and in many ways you will go further faster with your own strengths, because those are inherently you and you know how to do it. And it's sort of like, immediately back of the hand, no problem. But the people who have the willingness to translate how some of those strengths can live and potentially change some of the areas of opportunity, as we'll call them, in a nice branding way instead of weaknesses, because nobody's weak, right? It's just a matter of how you view the challenge, and maybe physically we can talk about that if there's, a different side. but
We don't want to talk about weightlifting, Alexa. You're going to make us feel
I gotta
terrible.
get it in there somewhere. That's an on-brand thing, No, but having the willingness to try and to learn is important, because also, if you're not changing and if you're not evolving, you're not growing. And a lot of times when you don't try and when you stay really insular in your own strengths, you're losing out on all of the growth that can happen sort of, in the cliche way of like outside of the comfort zone. So I agree with you, Joe, that I think there's a hybrid nature inside of all of that. Yes, from a weighting perspective, you're probably going to look at 60 to 65% of like where your strengths are, what you uniquely you can do. But if you don't pay attention to that 35 to 40% of the growth areas, you will not ultimately be as successful. And quite frankly, in my opinion, I don't know that people will be as fulfilled, because sometimes trying something new and getting in the muck, and at CBX, one of our values is dirty hands, like rolling up your sleeves and just getting dirty with it and giving it a try. It's kind of thrilling and exciting. Not everyone loves that, but being able to find joy and beauty and excitement in the gray area is a skill in and of itself.
I love that.
I totally agree. And one of my, Lynda-isms, and these are little things that pop up in people's career. I get text messages randomly from people who used to work with me, and they're like, again. But one of the things I always say is, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. I mean, they don't call them growing pains for nothing, right? And it's so crucial to understand. I always tell managers, I'm like, the minute you get too comfortable at work is the minute you need to be really worried, because that's when things start to fall apart, because you got too complacent, you got too comfortable, you allowed that warm, fuzzy feeling to like it. And we've all felt that feeling, that warm, fuzzy feeling. And then we wake up going, oh my God, I'm late, right? Like we have all felt that feeling. And we don't want that to creep into our careers, right? And there's a balance between being comfortable in your career, meaning like, I actually don't want to continue to climb the ladder. I don't want to, I talked with clients all of the time that are like, I don't want to move into leadership, or I don't want to be in, because with these increased titles and whatnot come increased responsibilities, and I don't want that. So then it's about finding a different way to be uncomfortable in your role. So maybe you don't want to be uncomfortable from growing up, but what about growing out, right? And what about expanding that vision and still being able to be comfortable in your position, but still like finding ways of challenging yourself or finding new things to learn at work.
Yeah. And I think something that you just said reminds me, my husband and I talk about this all the time. Pressure is a privilege, right? I think a lot of people talk about, you move up the ladder and you get into, new roles, and maybe you have a different salary, or maybe you have direct reports now, or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, you're still getting more responsibility. You should be getting more responsibility. The weight of the problems are heavier. And those who thrive are the ones that view it from a lens of pressure as a privilege. And moreover, I think it's really important to remember, particularly as we all have gotten more senior in our careers, it is our duty to model behaviors for others that are on their way and up, moving themselves through the ranks as well. And so if we all look like we stay stagnant in just our strengths and never show up in places where our areas of opportunity are illuminated, we're not modeling the behavior for the other people that we are going to expect and want to have that level of curiosity and growth and whatnot as part of their brains, right? So it is our duty as managers and as humans to spread some of that sort of thinking and model those behaviors. So it's something that I remind myself. And I think where also, part of my personal brand as it relates to leadership style is to level set and help others recognize from an empathy standpoint of like, I have been in those shoes before, so that it's not like you are just coming in as a senior, individual and kind of pretending like you have not gone through the muck that occurs in many of the sort of waffle territories of, being a junior or having multiple managers or having managers switched out on you or, whatever it might be. Right. So, just modeling behaviors is like really important. And I think we forget that. I think many people forget that often.
Yeah. Well, and I think I do believe, and if we're going to talk about modeling behaviors, one thing to also call out is let's model good behaviors.
Absolutely.
I know it sounds silly to say these things, but the thing that I found through my journey as I've been working with private clients and doing the research in my space, right, as far as like management and how managers are trained and what they get, so often we get managers who model poor behavior, right?
Correct.
They come in and they yell and pout and stomp their feet and do the things because that's what they have seen done. So with that, let's put a little caveat in there, like model good behavior. Let's try and be better. That's the whole point, right?
I couldn't agree more. And, my husband and I map out our goals every year, and we have kind of like family values that we list down because our family, has a brand, let's call it. But then we also list down sort of idioms and isms and all of that we abide by. And honey over vinegar is really important to us because you will go further in life in general erring toward a side of honey from what you message, what you say, how you say it, your body language, all of that, than vinegar. Look, everybody's got an off day. Everybody gets frustrated. Things do often, the shit hits the fan for sure. And vinegar may come out, but it is about creating the 85 to 90% in the honey space, not the vinegar space.
Yeah.
I love that.
I agree.
Yeah. And especially
Exactly. I noticed it right when we came on,
Yep.
and I was like, that is very on brand for how Lynda thinks. So yes, of course that would be the sign that's in her office.
Exactly. Alexa, one of the things that, I've noticed as you've been talking, and I think is really interesting, is kind of seamlessly blending in commentary about brand strategy and personal strategy. And I was overjoyed and kind of relieved that you took it there so effortlessly. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised at all, but it was honestly one of the things I was most curious about heading into today's episode, and I plan to ask you about. I come from more of a background as a CX leader where honestly, the idea of focusing on personal brand earlier in my career, I would have found uncomfortable. A little bit less so now, and it's a joy to be up to this moment. But I would have thought like personal brand, that doesn't apply to me at all. But I just went about my business, the team and the CX strategy. Whereas for you, it's very different, right? Like I remember from day one at Daily Harvest and seeing your bio even before that, you were always shaping a brand strategy and roadmap. And at the same time, you struck me and everybody right away as someone who had a really strong personal identity and brand. I'm curious to have you kind of help us unpack. I mean, what are the similarities and any differences between a company's brand strategy and a personal brand strategy? And then related to that, how do you kind of weave one into the other? When you go to work every day, you're shaping company strategies and representing your own brands, and how do these kind of play out, day to day together?
100%. It's a great question. So you're correct in that a lot of just sort of my general ethos is that it is important to recognize the similarities between building great brands for corporations and companies and building great brands as human beings and as people, right? We as people are brands in some ways. Some may be louder than others and some may be more consistent than others and whatnot, but it's the same thing you've watched influencers, pro athletes, any of that sort of like group that has distribution and has eyes on them, they're building brands over time, right? My thinking around it is that if one does not take the time to define their own brand, other people will do it for you. That exists both in corporation perspective and in personal perspective. The thing where it's different in personal perspective is it's often based on 1, 2, 3 of the moments in time that that other group or community experiences of you. It's not necessarily the in totality. I think corporations, it's a longer tail experience for businesses that are building brands, and one bad apple of an experience does not spoil the barrel per se. It's also very different per category and whatnot. I was actually just explaining this to someone about how I've tried a protein bar and I absolutely despised it. And now I go into the grocery store and it's the one brand that I cannot pick up like off the shelf. And it was like a one and done type of thing, right? Even though I love the marketing, I love the team, I love the brand, like all of it's great, but it just, product to lips didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So, in general, brand strategy is all about creating alignment. So as an example, inside of the world of companies, you're creating alignment around the teams that you're building, the messaging that you're, putting out into the world, the products that you're building, the customer experiences that you're creating. All of your brand strategy is important for those areas of alignment. It's a decision-making function. It's helping you say no to certain things because they are off brand. It's not dissimilar for people, but from a people perspective, it's about aligning how you want to show up, how other people are perceiving you showing up, and then creating the consistency over time for that. So, to give like a tangible example, companies have their value system, as I mentioned, right? So values might be, innovate more, dirty hands, as I mentioned, is one of CBX's. And those value systems start to allow people to make decisions and understand, how do we hire? Who do we hire based on who aligns with our value as a corporation, right? What type of experiences do we create for our team members based on our value system? What technology do we use based on our value system, right? So that's sort of like in corporation perspective. In a personal perspective, the same thing can be true. So as an example, I mentioned I have values. My 4 values are deliver and excellence. So when I think about delivering an excellence as a person, if I'm decorating my Christmas table, I'm doing it like I'm somehow Martha Stewart. Okay. I have no training
Does
whatsoever
not surprise
in that.
me.
Okay. But it's going to be on brand. It's going to be beautiful, deliver an excellence. But it's also the same thing of how I deal with deliverables. I want all of my deliverables and my team and everything that we're putting out into the world with companies delivered in excellence. Okay, great. That's now me setting an expectation of what people can get from that value system. The other is strong opinions weekly held. I have strong opinions. I'm an Aries. I have a point of view, but I'm also open to having discussion and being swayed based on evidence and conversation and communication and all of that, right? So strong opinions weekly held. The last 2 are stay insatiably curious, as I mentioned. And if you don't ask, you don't get. Lynda, I feel like you would appreciate that one because it takes one to know one, right? But that's a little bit of that edge that's just like, hey, if you stay in silence, no one's going to be able to help you. No one's going to be able to know that you're even looking for certain things. So if you don't ask, you don't get. That exists both in my personal life and in the boardroom, right? If you want to get to a certain thing, if you want to write more thought leadership, if you want to get a raise, if you have to talk about it, you have to ask for it. You build the right case to do so, but you have to ask for it. So it's important to recognize that they are not, you will need to pivot and slightly tweak based on a corporate context versus a personal context. But all of it comes down to setting expectations and ensuring that everyone recognizes what they can expect from working with you, from hiring you, from being, putting you in the room with them. There's just sort of a baseline understanding, and that's what it means to be on brand across, both personal and corporate contexts.
Love that.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I'll say one thing I took from that, and actually I'd be really curious to get both of your take. Lynda, I'm kind of looking at you because I'm thinking even of our chats and kind of prepping for today's episode. But again, I'm just being, really transparent and humble here and saying that, like, I was an idiot. Earlier in my career, again, I would have looked at personal brand as something that was really intimidating. It was kind of for the cool kids. It wasn't for me. And so I wouldn't have really wanted to talk about it. But I think one of the realizations I had, and again, I give Lynda credit for someone in my life and career who just helped me reach this obvious epiphany, is like, it's happening already. Kind of to your point, Alexa, like, you don't choose whether to have a personal brand or not. You do have one. So like, accept it, get over it. And as I went through life and career, and I'm working these different jobs, and I'm showing up to interviews, and like, I choose to focus on this and not that. I present in this way, not that way. Like, that is the brand, dummy. It's kind of saying the same thing. And so part of my evolution was realizing, okay, it's happening already. It exists. I have one. To Alexa's point, if you don't focus on it, you're just sort of giving up control over what that brand might be. And that actually it's very important to focus on it as far as career success and trajectory. I think also just in terms of fulfillment, saying yes to the right things, saying no to the right things, etc. And my final kind of mini revelation, which I was very late to the party on, is like, life is too short. You know, like, again, as the overthinker on the podcast, life is too short. Like, have a little bit of fun with it, lean into it too. And that's why, again, I want to wear my See Extra sweatshirt today. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, but I've made different decisions over the last 6 or 8 months, you know, having my own little solopreneur venture of like, is this absurd or is it smart or beneficial? And if I can't figure it out, I'm just like, it sounds fun. It sounds fun, as life is too short. And I think that's leaning into authenticity a little bit there too. But Lynda, I'm sure you have all the thoughts on all the things. And, you know, like, again, shout out for kind of helping me along with some of my obvious epiphanies. But what are your thoughts here on all the things?
Well, I think to your point, Joe, it reminds me of something. I think Tony Robbins says this a lot. Like, you can let life happen to you, or you can let life happen for you. And I think when you take a minute and you step back and you say, okay, when it comes to personal branding, whether we're calling it that, whether we're intimidated by it, like wherever we sit on that, or whether we're calling it bullshit, you know, that was me. Whatever we're doing, we can bring it back to that statement. So to your point, Joe, it's happening anyway, no matter what we call it, right? Like, no matter what we call it, it's happening anyway. So can we let it happen to us? Meaning, can we say, you know, from my perspective, I'm better than like feeding into a corporate buzzword and being my own brand? Or, you know, that's letting it happen to me, or can I let it happen for me? So can I gain that awareness? Can I take a minute and put thought into it and be intentional and decide that it's happening for me versus to me? And I think that that's the big difference here. And I think for people who are listening who don't know where to start, or don't, maybe it's still kind of an elusive topic to them, think about, like, it's already happened. People already talk about you at work. I mean, people talk about you all the time. I mean, they talk about me all the time.
All good things.
But, you know, people talk about you all of the time. And do you want to be part of that conversation in a sense of guiding that? Are they talking about, you know, and everybody is always going to find something negative about you, or they're always going to find something bad to say. But at the end of the day, do you want people to sit down and be like, this is the person that we need to call because I know they're going to pull through, right? I'm not saying that they're perfect, but I know that they're going to pull through.
Mm-hmm.
If that's like your intention, that's again where we're starting to say, like, now be intentional with your brand, because you already have a brand. It doesn't matter. You already have a brand. So Alexa, I kind of want to pivot a little bit. I want to talk about, so you've done the research, you've done the work, right? And I thought, you know, when you talked about having people who are trusted people who will tell it to you, I totally agree. I think you should also ask some people who don't know you very well. Like, hey, if you were to say one word to describe me, and they're going to be nice. They're, especially if they don't know you well, they're not going to be like, oh, you're lazy. Like, they're probably not going to say
Depends
that.
who you ask, though, right?
You might. You get me on a good day, and you might get the real truth.
You said it, not me.
Notice it was a good day, not a bad day. Bad day, I'm going to say real nice things. But the thing is, I think that that's really important. But you've done the research, you've talked to the people, your trusted advisors, maybe some randos, and you now have this picture. What happens if it's not the picture you want? How do you start to pivot that?
I think it's a really great question. In today's landscape, particularly because the marketplace is just so crowded, it's moving so fast, like communications and content are everywhere, everybody's trying everything. It's a lot and it can feel very overwhelming. I think coming back to the reminder that building a brand is shortcutting to trust. And trust is coming from authenticity. I know those are like buzzwords and such, but at the end of the day, we really are trying to work with people, and your resume is a bunch of facts, but your brand is the thing that gives everything meaning. And so people need to really think about, if that's how I'm, let's say it's as you mentioned, there's dissonance between how I think I'm out in the world and how I'm being perceived. What you want to start to understand are examples of why that is the case, and then making the determination of, am I going to change that behavior or not? Right. And I think so I'll use an example with myself as as an Aries, and you guys have worked with me, and you've used verbiage already on this podcast, powerhouse, not intimidating, but like some people may view it as intimidating, right? Some people may view it as aggressive, or bullish. I have made a choice on how to determine not to take away my own powerhouseness, because I'm not going to dim that. But I've also found ways to, and I never want to say like make others more comfortable, but enroll others in the experience of why this route might actually be something that's highly effective and something that can be welcomed and something that can learn from, right? So there is also a level of discernment that has to happen, where you don't just sort of like pretend as if you're lost and you don't have clarity on who you are. You're not looking to change who you are. You're looking to change what you're claiming about yourself, right? And there are some things that you may say, you know what, I'm not attached enough to want to claim that, if that is something that is not working for me. Or you might say, actually, this is something I do believe in. This is something that has worked. The other thing important too is to remember not to focus on a focus group of one. I mean, no researcher would do that. And there are going to be individuals where we will not be each other's cup of tea. That's okay. It's one person. If the average and the majority, I should really say, feel differently, that patterns are being built in a different space. So don't take one piece of feedback as this is the end all be all. And I think, quite frankly, I've experienced that, and I'm sure we all have, with managers, right? Where you're like, oh my goodness, this one manager thought this one thing about me, and therefore that must now be part of my brand. No.
Yep.
So the discernment is really important when you get that feedback and that understanding of how do you want to proceed. And then I always, I'm a person that lives in beta, just beta test things. See, you might go into a meeting and you may choose to handle it exactly how you would handle every other meeting before, and probably get that same result of, potentially a negative experience. Try something different, try it differently, and then start to be able to say, oh, wow, that worked in a way that I didn't expect.
I love that. Yeah. I'm so glad you hit the word intimidating. Because I get that word all of the time, intimidating, unapproachable. And I do think that those are so, especially as women, they're very disheartening to hear, because we're like, but I'm not, and I'm not trying to do this thing. And I do think, to your point, there's also a moment where you get to say, like, that's a you problem. Like when you do the deep soul searching and you do like the really like looking deep, and I can tell you that, okay, if you come to me and ask for help, there's no way that I'm going to like turn around and be like, right. If you need something, if you come and want to have a conversation with me, just because I might have some RBF, like it doesn't mean that it has nothing to do with you, right? Like it has nothing to do with you. And so, but I got that feedback for years and years and years about being unapproachable and being intimidating. And I did everything I could to change that. And it was so disingenuous. And I think, made it worse. And I had to finally sit with it and be like, at this point in time, like, I know the human that I am, and I know that I care, and I'm deeply empathetic. And if you will give me an opportunity to show you that, then you'll see that. But if you're too afraid to come ask a question or do the thing, at this point in time, that's not a me thing. Like, it gets to be a you thing. So I do think, like, when you take that feedback and you're analyzing, to your point, it's about saying, like, is this something that I can control? Truly, is it something I can control? If you come in and they're like, oh, they're the worst in a meeting and they sideline everything and it's always about them and they're saying these things, that's a thing you can change, because you can say, oh, I could be less vocal in a meeting. Not everybody needs to know my opinions. I can write things down, right? That's a shift in your brand, right? But if it's like, I can't help that I wear every emotion on my face, and if I'm thinking about like liver and onions and I'm making a face, at the moment you walk by to ask me a question, I may not be able to like stop that. And that's that's
Yeah.
a part of my brand I'm not changing.
And it's also, I look at it too like dials, right? So if you just think about like a radio dial or even a volume dial on a computer, like what are you going to dial up at certain times? What are you going to dial down, right? So I've gotten feedback before where I am an empath to a fault, right? And I am. I'm totally an empathetic individual. My EQ is very, very high. It's just part of being a brand strategist, I think, in many ways, and also just constantly discovering the why of things, right? But in times where people are, potentially underperforming, as an example, I have to be careful about how high I dial my empathy barometer, because I can't make excuses for what we know is potentially bad for the business, potentially bad for team morale, any of the things that are sort of impacting that, right? So that's where it's like, okay, I have this dial of empathy. I can put it really high when someone's going through a challenging time, with family or friends or whatnot, or I can put it really high when we are in extracurricular activities outside of a meeting, to really demonstrate that, like, I'm still a human, and we can level set together. But in as it relates to when like performance things come through, there has to be a dial down, because you can't have such high empathy that you over excuse, or you make
Hmm.
you sort of condone behavior that is very clear behavior. It's behavior that's not working. So that's again where it's discernment. And that's why, going back to the top of the conversation, why modeling behaviors is so important, because other more junior people need to see that you are modeling the behavior of discernment, because then they won't understand how to start doing the dial up and dial down discernment without that, right? And it's an important skill. Like these soft skills, I'm very passionate about the soft skills, because part of your personal brand, your resume gets you in a door, but your personal brand oftentimes does harder work for you when you're not even in the room yet.
Yes. Yes.
And that's where it's like, I want every person that I've ever worked with, you two included, if somebody picks up the phone and says, what was your experience? I want my experience to be, Joe, what you said at the top of the call. That like warmed my heart, because I was like, okay, that clearly I had the same experience and I would do the exact same thing. But that's because we worked together to make that relationship occur, and to keep each other in high standards and in high thinking, and deliver in excellence back to the values together. And so that's really important, that like that back channel is part of your brand. And I think that's Lynda, to go back to the question too about like, or not question, but to go back to when you were saying talk to a stranger or someone who doesn't know you well, I would pose the question like, on first glance, how do you perceive me? How do I come across? What do because there's a lot of things that come into this too, just in terms of just systemic bias that we have of how people are based on how they present themselves. And it's really important to understand what that means and how you're then perceived, and then how you break it down, right? So I just think it's important, like, always keep your core no matter what, but the core can flex and adapt and dial up and dial down and dial to the side based on context.
Yep. Love that. Love
I
that.
feel a lot of admiration sincerely listening to both of you, and it was kind of occurring to me, it was thought provoking in terms of the parts of one's personal brands that you should compromise on and kind of cater to others or like look to evolve or change in some way, versus the part of your brand and who you are that you shouldn't compromise on. And Lynda, you mentioned the perspective listening to Alexa of being fellow strong women leaders. And while I can't relate personally, I was thinking about that angle as well. And it's something I don't want to let the moment pass without mentioning. I have been in many, many meeting rooms, and especially leadership rooms, where that, kind of bullshit dynamic occurs of a male leader could present a perspective in a certain way, and then after the meeting it's like, bravo, like what a strong leader, what a visionary, and like uncompromising and like strong voice. And where a woman leader could present the same perspective and it's not viewed the same way. There's definitely admiration and kudos and a comment here. I'm not really sure if there's a clean, neat question for either of you, but it almost feels like higher stakes, like for the other people in the room and for people you're managing, perhaps, women coming along in their career. It feels really important that you two don't compromise on being assertive leaders. And I just wanted to acknowledge that's kind of a burden. But I really admire that about both of you, not compromising on that. If other people don't get it or they perceive it the wrong way, like kind of screw them at a certain point. I don't know. Easy for me to say, right?
Well, we're fortunate, I think, and fortunate enough in our careers where we can also say, yeah, I just it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter anymore. Amazing. Well, this conversation I think has really kind of flown by. I realized I never delivered on what the AI said about me. So I should maybe
That's right. We got so
maybe
caught
we'll
up.
close out with like everybody who's stuck along this far in the podcast. The reward is you get to find out what the internet said about me. I
That's
don't
a great
know, but
reward, Lynda.
so I lost the chat, but it said something to the effect of like Lynda Leeds is known as a corporate baddie with a no nonsense approach, direct honesty, and helps you understand how to set boundaries and get paid. So
Nice.
that is what it said about me, and I'm not mad about it. Like I'm not mad about it.
Your GPT sounds like a very boisterous Gen Zer. That has, but it's not bad. It's not bad. Like I get it. I've heard the same things. Takes one to know one.
Yeah.
And yeah, that tracks. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
That
I
tracks.
love that for you, Lynda. I bet, Alexa, if you had a similar write up, something about, and like harkening back to something you mentioned a couple of times, is these standards for excellence that you have. I want to have you back on the pod one time to talk about only that and to know, like, is it exhausting having such incredibly high standards for everything that you do? But it's
Yes.
interesting, and I think that would be mentioned in your summary.
Yeah. I know, as you said, Lynda, we shouldn't Google ourselves. I'm going to go do the exact same exercise after this because now I'm curious as well. And I hope I get something as cool as corporate battery. So,
Amazing. Well, I think we've had a great discussion here. Really appreciate all the insight. Alexa, do you want to give us your first and last name again, where the people can find you, who want to connect with you, maybe LinkedIn, anywhere else that they can connect with you before we wrap things up?
you got it. Again, my name is Alexa DePascuale. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. I'm known as FlexiD. That's my, kind of like social handle. So please follow along. And I'm looking forward to continuing conversations with others and with both of you always.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I would be morally remiss if I didn't end the pod with let's talk about one thing that's kind of got us hot under the collar
Morally
today.
remiss.
Yes, morally remiss. Listen, what? Okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm referring to my notes. A brand is a promise performed consistently over time. So I would be morally remiss and I would be absolutely off brand if I didn't ask the question at the end of the pod. So, Alexa, since you're our guest, I'm going to open with you. Anything that's got you hot under the collar?
Yeah, The mindset that you have to dim other people's light to make yours shine brighter. That has got to fucking go in 2026.
Yes.
We're done with that. We're done with that.
Yes.
You go further faster with a group and with team and togetherness, and that's how we're programmed as humans. So like, let's do it.
Love it. Love it. Joe, do you want to tell us what's got you hot under the collar?
Yeah, 1000%. So something that really gave me a lot of joy this past week, because I think that's what you just asked,
Yep.
is, you know, I was I I had the chance to connect with a friend, one of those career turned life friends yesterday. And I think for both of us, it was probably one of those appointments where you see it on the calendar and you're like, oh, there's like a lot going on, and like, should we make time for this and all of this? And also I was feeling that sort of like almost imposter syndrome at times talking to her. She's someone I really admire. And I was like really hesitant to give any advice. We talked for like an hour. You know, we could have talked for several. And it was so uplifting. And we kind of touched base after and just agreed that the feeling of you know, jamming and kind of like having each other in our corners and giving each other advice, like true friend caring advice, was so uplifting. And for me, I did a lot of other stuff for, you know, work and career stuff that day, but I also had the thought of like, if I did nothing else today, it kind of feels like a successful day because I had that connection point and I've cultivated that relationship in my career. So like something's going right. And it was just a reminder for me, like, take the call, connect with the person, also give the advice, even if you think you don't have the right to, or you're not smart enough to do so. If it's coming from a place of sincerity and caring, they'll probably appreciate it. So Lynda and I agree that we're always going to be completely genuine and sincere on the pod. And that's why I'm allowed to say something that gave me joy when Lynda asked me what pissed me off. Lynda, what gave you joy or made you hot under the collar?
So I was going to try and bring it back to cereal, just to bring full circle. Like I really was trying to bring it back to cereal. Like
You're so much better at that than I am. Makes my
like
head
Grape
hurt.
Nuts and Wheaties have got to go. But that wasn't my original thing I was going to come talk about.
Well, you snuck it in anyway.
So Grape Nuts and Wheaties, got to go.
Grape nuts are nasty.
Yeah, but cheap nail polish remover, it's got me. I was trying to like get ready for the pod. I had these last two nails that I just couldn't get nail polish off of because the cheap nail polish remover was not doing its job. So that's what's got me hot under the collar today.
Amazing.
Cheap nail polish. Amazing. Well, you both have been so great. Thanks so much. Joe, do you want to tell the people to like and subscribe?
Yes, please. I like having this job too. Rate us, like the podcast, follow the podcast. I think that's important. I'm told that's important. And leave a review. And really, like, I won't stop saying this. It's very on brand for us and it's very sincere. Like, we want to know what people think. So if you love it, let us know. If you're like, not so much, let us know. And especially if you have any advice, anything you'd like us to do more or less of, we're more than open to it. My last comment related to nothing is I just remembered one of the times I reached out to Alexa the last couple of years was around some recipe that was just completely on fire. How to make something. I don't remember what it was, but I remember it was really impressive and people definitely should follow Alexa on all the platforms.
Yes.
Very typical of your overall brand, just kind of excellence for all the things and weaving it together seamlessly. Alexa, thank you for being our first ever podcast guest, and just I think we made a really great decision, Lynda. The easy part was having you come on. You're awesome, Alexa, and just such a privilege. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much,
Privilege is
Alexa.
mine.
You've been great.
Thank you.
Oh, and big shout out to Poland. Apparently, we are big in Poland. So to all of our Polish listeners, what's up, Poland?
Lynda,
Okay,
we should
thanks,
have prepped
everybody.
and figured out how to sign off in Polish, but maybe for next time.
Next time.
Okay. Bye, friends.
Bye.